Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my full review of the Spirit Torino Super Leggera. I did a first impressions of this. It's been almost a month now, and I only had a few hours in it at the time, and now I've had more time to put in some longer listening sessions with this headphone, and for the most part my feelings about it have stayed the same, but a few things have changed a little bit, so that's why I'm doing this full review tonight. This headphone is made in Italy, currently sells for $16.50 in US dollars, and it is sold by Headamp, and I believe they're the only authorized US dealership of this headphone. It is a wired design. It's a medium-sized headphone. It's considered an on-the-ear, and it is open-back design. It uses a dynamic driver in what Spirit Torino calls an isobaric chamber. It has an impedance of 32 ohms. And the sensitivity is not given by Spirit Torino, and in my first video, the first impressions, I said it was a little bit hard to drive, but I think I misjudged it because I was using the GSX Mini amp from Headamp, and I only had it a couple days, and I didn't realize at that time when the gain setting is on low, the power output of that is a little on the low side, and was overestimating how much power it took to drive these. So really now I would just say they're about average for a 32mm dynamic driver type design. These use a detachable cable with your standard 3.5mm connections on it. The cable is I think about 7.5 feet long. It's nice material, it's soft, it's flexible. And like I said, it uses your 3.5mm connections at the ear cups, and I believe it can be ordered with either a 6.3mm single-ended connection at the amp end, or this one here came with a 4-pin XLR connection. I did want to show you the box that this came in, and it's quite nice. And inside it has very nice foam padding and protects the headphone very well, and actually makes pretty nice display case. As far as, well, I wanted to show you the headphone in a little better detail. And yes, they do have sort of a grotto look to the design, the way the adjustment is. They do swivel all the way around. Everything, the entire ear cup is made of aluminum on these. The yoke is made of aluminum. I think you have a steel shaft here and then aluminum block on the headband. The headband is all covered in leather, and the stitching and everything looks real nice. And then the ear pads are leather around the outside, and the inside is a very soft material, and I wasn't sure what it was called when I did my first video. And I was informed by Headamp that it is called Alcantara. And it's sort of a velour material, but it's very soft and feels really nice. The build qualities of these seems to be absolutely excellent. I mean, it's just the ear cups, all that, the headband, everything seems to be flawless. So build quality is very good on these. The fit and comfort, they actually feel almost like a full-size over-the-ear headphone to me. The ear pads are actually pretty large, and it fits around behind my ear, not on top of my ear. So I feel like these are an over-the-ear headphone, and they feel nice, and there seems to be enough room. The weight is pretty reasonable for a full-size. This would be a light headphone, and they're very comfortable to me, and the clamping force is just about right. It's tight enough that they don't move around on me. They don't feel like they're going to fall off, yet I don't feel any clamping force on them. I want to talk a little bit about the equipment I used in reviewing these. And started out, I was running CDs through a Cambridge Audio 540C CD player, and as a transport only, running a digital signal out of that to a Benchmark Media DAC1. and then an analog signal from there to the GSX Mini by Headamp. And I tried it at first with the balanced connectors from my DAC to the amp, but I wanted to show or throw the shit low key in to do some EQing, and so I had to run the single-ended outputs, but I was able to try some EQing on this headphone, and did respond very well, so I want to talk about that in a little bit. The music I ran through was kind of a mixture of rock, pop, electronic, acoustical. I'll show you just a few of the CDs. This was yesterday. I spent a couple hours, maybe 3 hours or so, messing with this headphone. And I had listened to some Norah Jones, some Tori Amos, some Sarah McLachlan, Steely Dan, Dire Straits, Fleetwood Mac, some Rush. This would be Metallica, the Black Album, and some 9 Inch Nails, and some Tool, Anemia. So anyway, I ran a pretty good variety through this, and the conclusion I came to was that this headphone is best matched with rock and electronic music. So that's what I kind of concentrated on towards the end, and then as a comparison, I pulled out my Kennerton Valley. That would be the original first, not the new edition from last year, but the original first, which for the last probably year and a half has been my #1 go-to headphone as far as rock and electronic music. And that's what this headphone seems to be best at, so I use that as a comparison. And then I also want to compare this a little bit to the Hi-Fi Man Aria because of the price is very similar. The Aria is about $50 cheaper. So anyway, same price range, quite a bit different headphones. So I wanted to give a comparison of those. Getting into the sound, excuse me a second. Starting with the tone balance, I would say that I would describe the tone balance of this headphone as warm, a little bit on the dark side, and definitely bass heavy. They, without a doubt, have a pretty substantial emphasis on the bass. The frequency extension is good on the bottom end. They do go very low. Average on the top end. They do roll off a little bit in the treble. The bass itself I would describe as deep, powerful, dynamic, but it's solid. It doesn't get boomy, it doesn't just get distorted, and it doesn't sound muddy. So a whole lot of powerful bass, but good quality bass. I mean, I've heard headphones with a lot less bass than this that can't keep the bass under control, and these seem to do a real good job of controlling the bass and keeping it clean. The mids I would describe as warm, thick, definitely never sound thin, but they do sound a little bit distant, especially male vocals and even more so female vocals sound like they're off a little bit in the distance to me. The treble, I think, is slightly bumped up above the mids. The mids definitely set back on this headphone. The bass is definitely emphasized. I wouldn't quite call it a V shape, but the treble does sit a little bit higher in level than the mid-range, and there is a little bit of sparkle to it. Definitely not bright, but not, it is there. There is a presence to the treble, and I don't feel like it's lacking treble. It's just not a bright treble. As far as detail and resolution, it's not the last word in detail. There are definitely other headphones out there that sound more detailed, but those are mostly headphones that the mid-range is more forward and has more presence. That gives you the impression of more detail. And the way these sit, the way they come out of the box with no EQ. The detail seems to be a little lacking because the mid-range and treble are set back a little bit, especially compared to the bass. But I did try these with an EQ, and by bumping the mid-range up a little bit, the detail does come out, and they are actually pretty good as far as detail. The imaging seems to be good. It seems to be precise. I have no problem locating instruments or voices, that sort of thing. The soundstage I would describe as probably average in width and height, and but probably above average in depth. Because of the mid-range being a little bit set back, it does give the impression, or maybe the illusion, of more depth to the soundstage, because vocals do sound a little further away. So that does make it seem to have a little more depth. As far as dynamics, and I said in the first video that this was a very dynamic, very hard-hitting headphone, and it is to the most extent, but it's mostly in the bass. The mid-bass is very punchy and very dynamic. The mids and treble, because they're set back a bit, not so much so. I did want to talk about EQing, because this headphone does respond very well to EQ, and it's been my from what I've found over, what have I been doing reviews for, in a year and a half now, it seems the dynamic driver headphones seem to respond better to EQ than planar types. They just, especially if you're trying to emphasize a bass, they just seem to respond better. Anyway, this being a dynamic driver headphone, they do respond very well to EQing. The reason I wanted to talk about this is a very bassy headphone. It's got a lot of bass emphasis, and that may be perfect for some people. There's a lot of people in my headphone group that definitely like bassy headphones, and they want that. That's exactly what they want. I personally don't really consider myself a bass head. I probably was 20 years ago, and this would have been the perfect headphone for me. Now I prefer headphones that are a little more on the neutral side, and not quite as much. I do like a little bit of emphasis in the bass sometimes, maybe about 3 to 5 decibels. But these, I'm guessing, have probably about 10 to 12 decibels of bass emphasis based on neutral. So this headphone, to me, it's a lot of fun, especially with rock and electronic music. But after a while, the bass just gets a little overwhelming to me. It's a little bit too much. And I do like my mid-range a little more forward, so I can hear a little more detail. So I did experiment with EQs, and they did respond very well. And I'll show you where I came up with. Like I said, my favorite headphone for rock and electronic has been the Kennerton Valley, the original one. And that headphone probably has about 5 or 6 decibels of bass emphasis. And what I tried to do is I wanted to see what it would take with EQing to get this headphone kind of in the same tone balance as the Kennerton Valley. And with the Shit Loki, I was able to do that, and I figured I'd just show you with this diagram I made, which makes it a little easier to see. You have your 4 knobs, your 20 hertz, your 40, your 2K, and your 8K. And so I started out by cutting the bass a little bit, and I was at about 930 on the knob at 20 hertz, and then a little bit of boost in the low bass at about 130. Little bit more boost up to about 3 o'clock in the upper mid-range, and the treble was at about 2 o'clock. Gave it a little more sparkle, and a little bit of moderate EQing. I was able to get this headphone where I really like it. I mean, it really sounded good. It tamed down the bass a little bit where it's overwhelming to me, and boosting the mid-range and treble a little bit, I brought out quite a bit of detail, and I really liked it that way. So, and I'm not saying that this is a bad headphone without EQing, because there's a lot of people that like a darker, bassier headphone with, without the mid-range jumping out at you. And like I said, it would have been perfect for me a while back, but my tastes have changed. And for my personal taste right now, I preferred it with some EQing, but it does respond very well. So what it comes down to, my overall impression of this is if you are a bass head and you want a really bassy headphone, and this may be the perfect headphone for you. Especially if you listen to a lot of rock and electronic, that type of music. If you're looking for a neutral, accurate headphone and you're going to listen to primarily acoustic and orchestral music, that sort of thing, this might not be the ideal headphone. You'd probably be happier with something like the Hi-Fi Man Aria. The Aria has what I would consider a very neutral, well-balanced tone on it. It definitely doesn't have the bass of this headphone. Some people consider the Aria to be a little thin sounding. And if you are one of those people, then this may be ideal for you. The Aria does definitely have more energy in the mids and treble. It has more detail. But this headphone has it all over the Aria in build quality. This thing is leather and aluminum and very well built. The Aria is pretty much entirely plastic and uses synthetic leather. So as far as build quality, they're not even close. This headphone, is way above the Aria. But the Aria, if you're looking for an audiophile type headphone, and by that I mean something accurate and neutral, then the Aria may be a better choice. So anyway, this headphone, with a little bit of moderate EQing, was very enjoyable for me. In its stock form, without the EQing, the bass was a little overwhelming to me, and I felt like I was missing a little bit of mid-range detail. But like I said, that's just my personal preference. It doesn't make this a bad headphone. It just depends what you're looking for. If you want a bassy headphone, definitely check out this headphone, because a bass is not only have a lot of power behind it and a lot of weight behind it, the bass is clean. I've heard other headphones that don't have near the bass of this headphone that can't keep the bass under control. The bass gets distorted and muddy, where this headphone has a lot of bass and it keeps the bass clean. So if that's what you're looking for, this could possibly be the ideal headphone for you. So basically, if you're looking for a super accurate neutral headphone, there's probably better choices. If you're looking for a bassy, really fun headphone that works really well with rock and pretty much any kind of rock, pop, electronic music, that sort of thing, you're probably going to like this headphone. So in that case, I would recommend it. Anyway, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and this video has helped you. Please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel, and you are all welcome to join us at our headphone group on Facebook by the same name, the Headphone Experience. Thanks.